I've been reflecting this week a little bit on beauty, and reflecting on some of the beautiful things that I've seen just in the past month. One of the things that I've seen has just been natural beauty. The other week I was on my morning run and had my cell phone with me, so I saw this and I had to stop. And you see the poppies, the fields of poppies that come out in May. That for me, this is my first spring in and around Madrid. When we were in Castellon, we didn't have uh, this many poppies, and so I had to stop my run, take a picture because I was just um, captured or captivated by the beauty, by the natural beauty that I saw there in the fields. Um, when they lifted the state of alarm, we as a family we'd been planning a trip to go to Cordoba, where my wife was born and raised until she was 15, and we were going to do it last spring. Obviously, that didn't happen because we were in lockdown, and so as soon as they lifted the state of alarm, we took advantage and we went down to Cordoba. And Cordoba in May is just beautiful on so many levels. Um, yeah, you have these, there's this cultural beauty. And if you've ever been in Cordoba in May, they have the patios de flores. And so everything is decorated just absolutely beautifully. They have, tours set up to see all of these just people, families who decorate their patios. And there's a picture of me taking a picture. It's mostly a picture of one of the patios, but it's just amazing as you go into these places and how people have worked to create the beauty there. That is such an important part of the culture there in Cordoba. While we were there, we also enjoyed culinary beauty. So we had salmorejo, flamenquines, and there you see my daughter Laura really just digging into the flamenquin. That shows a little bit of her personality, but it was a simple and yet beautiful meal that we were able to enjoy together there in the restaurant. Now, we also, if you go to Cordoba, you can't miss the architectural beauty. Um, the Roman bridge is kind of an obligatory uh, photo that you have to take with family or without family, but you see the Roman bridge that's been there for 2,000 years with the mosque cathedral behind it, the city behind it. It's best, at this time of day, kind of at nightfall when things begin to be lit up. It's just, it's really breathtaking, captivating architectural beauty that you see there. And then earlier that same day, we had been in the mosque cathedral, and going from the outside in, you see all of these arches and these Arabic arches that are just incredible to think. Not just of building it, but designing and thinking through the beauty that you can uh, not just see, but almost fall into all around you there. So why all of this about beauty? One, I think we could all use a little bit more beauty in our lives, especially after the past 15 months. Beauty nurtures us, it soothes us, it refreshes us in a way that few other things do. It really is a gift from God. But secondly, God chose a beautiful place, uh, the gate known as the beautiful gate, to do an even more beautiful thing in Acts chapter 3. And so I invite you to turn to Acts chapter 3 with me. Um, and I kind of have two names for this message, and I was kind of divided. I didn't know which way to go with it. The title that I gave Edgar, More Than He Hoped For, it is a story about that, but it's also the story of a beautiful happening at the beautiful gate. And so by the end of the message, you can be the judge which title you like more. And so, yeah, turn to Acts chapter 3 with me. And there we're just going to read the story, and then we'll walk back through it a little bit more slowly. So it says that one day Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 in the afternoon. Now a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for money. Peter looked straight at him, as did John, and then Peter said, "Look at us." So the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. Then Peter said, "Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk." Taking him by the right hand, he helped him up, and instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. He jumped to his feet and began to walk. Then he went with him into the temple courts, walking and jumping and praising God. When all the people saw him walking and praising God, they recognized him as the same man who used to sit begging at the temple gate called Beautiful, and they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. So here we are. Peter and John, they're followers of Jesus, they're disciples of Jesus, now apostles being sent, but at the same time, they're still Jews, and so they arrive at the temple at 3 p.m. for one of the standard times of prayer, just part of the Jewish custom. And so there at the temple was a guy crippled from birth, and every day his friends or his family carried him there and left him by the temple gate, this temple gate called Beautiful, so that he could beg from those who went into the temple. And I want you to think for a moment, a beggar, what reaction does this image evoke in you? Think for just a moment about this man from the passage. He's a beggar. He's been crippled from birth, meaning he has never walked. His legs, his feet, his ankles, they had never worked. He didn't know what it was to walk, to just go out for a leisurely stroll, to play with his friends as a boy. He had never jumped. He'd never run. He'd never won a race. He didn't know what it was to dance with a beautiful girl. He didn't have the possibility of having a normal job. And I imagine he had always felt powerless, lame. But at the same time, it kind of seems like he had made the best of his situation, and that at least some family members or some friends carried him to the spot where alongside this gate where he did the only thing that he could. He begged. He asked for alms. He depended on the mercy of the people who were passing by into the temple. But there's a couple of super important details that we don't want to miss here. This crippled man always begs in the same place, the beautiful gate of the temple, which probably was an ideal place to beg because it was one of the main entrances to the temple. And so here you have a bit of a diagram of what the temple grounds were like in those times. And you see over here to the right where they believe was the gate called the Beautiful Gate, and they called it the Beautiful Gate most likely because it was covered in bronze or something that was shiny and reflective, and so as the sun came up it would reflect the light in a particularly stunning way. And they also say that it was likely nicknamed the Beautiful Gate because the architecture inside, that as you went into the temple grounds was breathtaking. It was stunning architecture that you could see as you walked in through that gate. And so, when people go in through this main gate, the Beautiful Gate, they're going to worship God in the temple, and they're likely a little more sensitive to others' needs at that moment. So naturally, they're going to give a little bit more money. It's kind of a sweet setup, right, given the situation for this guy to beg. But also, there's another detail that is super important. This crippled man cannot go further into the temple. Um, he can't go in like a normal Jewish man would go in to worship God, because the law in Leviticus 21 says that the lame and the sick cannot go in to give their offering to God. They have to stay outside, um, possibly in the women's courtyard that you see there, or even further out by the beautiful gate where this man was. And so this crippled man didn't know what it was, and he wouldn't know what it was to be able to go into the temple, to walk in there and to worship God like a normal Jewish man. He could watch others go in. He could see the beautiful architecture through the doorway, but he is outside forever, period. And I don't know if you can imagine his situation or put yourself in his shoes, but how would you feel in that situation? I know if I stop to think about it, I'd feel angry. I would maybe feel abandoned, frustrated, with a certain helplessness, emptiness, and hopelessness kind of eating at my heart. And I wonder how many people we know um, who might feel that same way in our neighborhoods, our places of work, perhaps our schools, maybe even church, who maybe feel like that crippled beggar outside outside of God, not being able to be reached by him. I remember a conversation that I had with a friend from high school that yeah, it's about 22 years ago, 1998, 1999. The two of us had just graduated from high school. He went to one university to study. I went to another university to study. And so we were chatting there with instant messenger. I don't know if you remember that, but back in the late 90s, that was the latest, greatest technological invention. We thought it was amazing. We couldn't ask for more. And so I was sharing with him about my relationship with Jesus, trying to explain to him just how much Jesus really does love him, how much he longs to offer him new life. But I simply could not convince him. And so we get to a certain point in the conversation when he confesses to me. He says, look, God cannot love me if it's true, if what I've heard is true, because I'm homosexual. And I was kind of stunned because that was news to me. I didn't know about that. And I didn't know if he had come to that conclusion that God didn't love him uh, because of something that I had said back in high school, or if it was something that he had heard or picked up from somewhere else. But somehow or other, he had received the message, God does not love you. You are outside of his love. Stay out there. By the way, I'm not condoning homosexuality or saying that it's not a big deal. The Bible is quite clear on that issue, but it is one sin among many others, and we all desperately need the transforming grace of God. But the message that he had received was the same one that this crippled man had received. You stay out. You have to stay out there. You're crippled. You're begging. You're a wounded person. Stay out there. So there he is, begging, when Peter and John, followers of Jesus, Jews at the same time, they're still Jews, and so they show up at the temple for 3:00 prayer time. And when this man sees Peter and John, he tries to reel him in. He starts calling out, alms for the poor, give me something, please, just a little something. I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut here, give me a little something, or whatever his hook line would have been. And I don't know if you were Peter and John, how would you react, or how you normally react when you see people begging? I almost always feel a reaction, kind of a mixture of suspicion, because I know that there's some sort of mafia action going on behind the scenes for a lot of this begging that goes on, in cities or in front of supermarkets. There's some mafia boss behind it. And so I feel a mixture of suspicion and yet compassion for the person who's in front of me. And so sometimes I stop, and sometimes I try to ignore the person. But when Peter and John hear and see this guy, they stop and they engage and they begin to talk with him, and they say, "Look at us." And this word means much more than just like a glance or just, look here, I want to tell you something quick. The idea is to look long, to look directly, to look deeply. Why does Peter want this man to look at them? When was the last time you looked at someone deeply in that way? Look them long, deep in the eyes. Maybe when you were angry and you had this rush of anger that you thought you wanted to kill the other person, or maybe if you can remember when you were in love and you look longingly and deeply into the person's eyes, you're the only one for me. Looking at someone that way a lot of the time is almost uncomfortable because it's so personal. It's almost too personal, too intimate if you're going to look for more than 2 seconds, depending on your culture. And I've noticed that oftentimes beggars won't look you directly in the eye. The other day at the supermarket, there was a beggar, and he kind of looked over my shoulder, and then he kind of stared off into the distance, and then he looked down at the ground, hoping that maybe I would toss some change down. But Peter and John want this deeply personal contact with this crippled man before they give him something far, far better, something far more beautiful than just some coins, just some money. They are fully present in this moment. They're fully aware of him, and they want him to be fully present and fully aware in this moment. And that makes me think. It makes me ask myself. Leads me to this question: Are we aware? Are you aware of the people around you as persons, the needs that surround you? Because if we want to be a part of healing others, we have to stop. We have to look very consciously. We have to be present and engage others and have personal contact with those in need. And often, I think so often, it just starts with shutting up and listening to other people, because there's so much white noise, so many distractions, so much hurry in our world and in our lives. But to be conscious, to be present to the needs of others, to the wounds of others, opening our eyes and our ears and our hearts, that really is the gate, the beautiful gate to being able to heal other people, to be a part of that healing. And so Peter and John, they had opened their eyes to this beggar who was always there, who was always at the beautiful gate. And this guy was probably more like a fixture who was there. I imagine he just kind of blended in with the background. People were used to looking at him. But this day, Peter and John looked at him, and Peter says to him, "You look at us." And so I think this crippled beggar thought he had a couple of customers, he had a payday, but Peter's about to drop a bomb. This beggar is hoping for some coins, but Peter's about to give him something far more valuable. And he says, "Look, I don't have silver or gold. I have no coins, but what I do have, I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, get up and walk." And boom, he drops this amazing, beautiful bomb on this man. Peter reaches out with his right hand. He lifts him up, and his legs, his ankles, his feet are instantly strengthened and healed. And we see the healing power of Jesus at work through Peter. The man is no longer crippled, so he begins not just to walk. He's jumping around all over the place. He's going crazy. He never knew what it was to walk or to run, and now he's practically dancing the Macarena for the glory of God. And then something absolutely remarkable happens. They don't just stay outside of the temple or in the outer courtyards. This man walks with Peter and John inside the temple to worship God for the first time. in his life. And all the people inside the temple, they're absolutely floored. They're amazed. They're awestruck, probably with a mixture of fear, because they see this man walking. They know who he is. They know where he was, or at least where he always used to be. And they know that something extraordinary, something truly powerful, truly beautiful has just happened. And Jesus, through Peter, has just healed this man completely. He healed him physically with his legs and his feet working now. He healed him relationally. As Peter and John looked at him, they engaged with him. Peter reaches out to touch him and raise him to his feet to take his first steps ever. Jesus healed him emotionally, as we can see in this man's joy as he practically dances into the temple. And he healed him spiritually, because for the first time in his life, he can go into the temple and he can worship God there and experience the intimacy and the beauty of worshiping God with no barriers anymore. So we can see, and I think we can hear the story, and maybe we say, wow, that is an amazing miracle. That is an amazing healing. What a display of power. But what does that have to do with me? I don't have that power, that gift of miracles that Paul talks about in his letters. I've never seen anything like that, much less done anything like that. So what does this have to do with me? These sorts of miracles still happen. And we hear stories of people being healed from injuries, from illnesses. God is still doing that in our time. I could share stories. We don't have time for me to share all the stories that I've heard. But at the same time, I know that God doesn't always answer our prayers for healing in others. My sister passed away from cancer 7 years ago, in spite of our prayers that she would be healed. My wife still has a chronic illness, even though we've prayed for her probably hundreds of times in different contexts, in different ways. Prayer and God's power are not a magic formula, but I'm still absolutely convinced that Jesus wants to use you and me to heal others, even though it may not always be through physical miracles. Several years ago, my wife Rachel and I received a tragic phone call. Her good friend from university was pregnant with twins, which obviously was great news. But a few months later, we received a message from this gal's sister telling us that she had gone into premature labor. 5 months into the pregnancy, the babies had no possibility of surviving. They simply were not developed enough yet. And they only lived for a few hours outside the womb before dying there in the hospital. And obviously, Rachel wanted to call. She wanted to comfort her friend somehow, but what do you say? What can you really say in that sort of situation? Words seem cliche, or they at least just don't seem adequate to comfort someone who's grieving so deeply with such a devastating loss. But finally, Rachel got her courage up. She picked up the phone and called her friend, just asking a few simple questions and then listening to the very short replies of her friend. And after a few moments of awkward silence, Rachel burst into tears and wept as she just cried out, it's so terrible. It's just absolutely terrible. And I'm so sorry. And Rachel in that moment simply cried with her friend on the telephone for a while, entering into her pain, empathizing with her friend in her deep pain. And so, yeah, you may not be able to do miracles like what Jesus and Peter did, but Jesus can use you to help heal other people in their emotional trauma and their relational and spiritual wounds. And many times it's just a matter of us taking the time to stop, to listen, perhaps to shed some tears with them. Who in your life needs to experience the healing power of God? perhaps a friend, a coworker, a family member, a neighbor, someone suffering physically or emotionally or relationally right now? How might God want to work through you? Maybe you need to listen. Maybe you do need to empathize and enter into the pain of someone else. Maybe God does want you to pray for physical healing for another person. You shouldn't discard that possibility either. How might God want to work through you to heal the people around you? One last thing um, before I close. Um, we've been talking all this time about Peter and John healing and how Jesus did that through them, and how we need to be. Jesus invites us to be agents of his healing as well. But before we finish, let me ask you one more question. How do you need to experience Jesus healing in your life, in your heart, and in your body? I mentioned last month when I was with you that we don't get the Peter and Acts with all the sermons, all the healings, without the conversation in this crucial moment of restoration in John 21, when Jesus restores him and heals his heart and heals that relationship with him that had been broken. And I also shared with you the words that Jesus gave me in my time of counseling and prayer and restoration several months ago. The words that he spoke to me, that BJ, I am making you wholehearted to help others to be wholehearted as well. The Catholic priest Henry Nouwen wrote that our world and what the church really needs are wounded healers. He has a book called that, The Wounded Healer. And what he means is that what the world needs are people who have experienced wounding, perhaps very deep traumatic wounding, but also have experienced and are receiving healing through Jesus, so that Jesus can then use them to heal people in this world, so that Jesus can heal others through us. And so now I'm involved in some deep discipleship with men, leading just a small group of us, 6 of us, through the book Wild at Heart. John Eldridge is the author. This book, Wild at Heart, we're reading it together, and I'd love to share a little bit more about that in another moment, but we don't have space to talk about that here. And a few weeks ago, I was preparing our session together. We meet every week, and we were preparing for the chapter called Healing the Wound. And as I was preparing our session together, I was praying, and what I heard Jesus say was this: lead them to me for healing. And so instead of simply sharing our experiences, our perspectives on the material, sometimes a particular paragraph or a particular illustration really speaks to us, and so we talk about that. There are other times that some people think, well, I don't fully agree with that, and we share our opinions, our experiences, and that sort of thing. But instead of just sharing those things and the material presented in the chapter, we dedicated a significant portion of our time to guided prayer, inviting Jesus into our wounds to meet us there. And I shouldn't be surprised, but Jesus showed up during our prayer time. A couple of the men had a very deep sense of Jesus with them there in their place of wounding. Others said that he was opening up places that they needed time to let him work on, that they were in process, and they knew they needed to give him more time and more space to work in those parts of their lives and their hearts that they had experienced wounding. One of the men had a deeply personal image of what Jesus was doing in him to heal him, so that he could work through him. And I may have been the only person who noticed this, but this particular man came in just tired from work and tired from the week. And after our time of prayer, his face was different. Like his face was lit up because Jesus had met him there and had given him this image of how he was working in him. All of this, I'm sharing all of this simply to ask you again, where are you experiencing brokenness in your life, in your heart, in your relationships? Where do you need healing Jesus still heals. And it may happen in an instant. He's perfectly capable of it. It may be a process of healing that he leads you through in some way or other. But he is the wounded healer, and he longs to heal you so that you can join him more fully in his mission of healing and restoration in this broken world. And it may just be out of that place of wounding and then healing that God does his greatest work through you. And that will be far more than you ever expected, far more than you ever hoped for. And it's so beautiful to live it and to see it and to experience it when it happens. Can I pray for you all? Yeah. And so, Jesus, you've spoken to us through your word. And we pause to say we love you. And we want more of you and more of us. We invite you into the broken places, the healing, the places that need healing. And we ask you to do your work there so that you can more fully and more deeply use us. So that you can make us more wholehearted, so that we can help others to be wholehearted and healed, whether physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. Our world is so broken. And you died. You were raised to new life for nothing more and nothing less than the restoration of this world that you love so much. So we ask you to give us the courage to take whatever the next step is for us, whether it's giving you the invitation to come in, to work more deeply in our lives, or giving you permission to lead us past the beggars, the crippled, the wounded, the hurting, to stop, to engage, and to be agents of your healing. Continue your work in us, and continue your work through us. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.